that you're here with us. Oh yeah, here we go. Are you ready?
It's a great day.
It is a great day. Woo! Welcome back, everyone. We hope you had fun and enjoyed all the inspiration that Brad Reed shared in our last segment just minutes before. Wow, what a great show that was. And now, gosh, I'm just so excited. We are here with Brian Bachand as the guest host. Hello, Brian. And we are here with Mac Marcoux, who is sharing his amazing story. Mac is a Paralympian athlete with Alpine Canada. He is a phenomenally accomplished athlete, ski racer. And believe it or not, he does it all by being blind. And it is just the most inspirational story that you are going to hear. You are just going to be left awe-inspired. Brian, will you please help me welcome Mac to the show?
Absolutely. Mac, it is such a joy to have you here. I think everyone's ready to just learn and hear your story. And thank you for bringing inspiration to us today.
Hey, no worries. Thanks for having me, guys.
Gosh, here at the Rise Today Inspirational Podcast, we are all about opening up the conversation about adversity and sharing tools to stay the course and to even thrive, just as Mac has done through it all. He is a phenomenal example of all that we are here to share with you today. And to boot, Mac is a hometown hero of my own hometown in Northern Ontario in Sault Ste. Marie, Canada. And I've just come to learn even yesterday that we both grew up ski racing on the very same hill, albeit a little bit of a 20-year age gap, with me being a little older here. But so this show is super special for me today. So I'm all about our Sault Ste. Marie Warriors, and this is just incredible, Mac, to have you here with us today. So welcome.
Yeah, no, I'm stoked to be here. Thank you so much.
This is amazing. So can you take us back? So by the sounds of it, you were this adventure child, just go, and thriving. And take us back to that time when you started to not be able to see that blackboard as clearly.
Yeah, so basically I grew up about 40K north of Sault Ste. Marie, just up on Lake Superior in Haviland Bay.
Okay.
And, we grew up in a pretty motorsports-oriented family. It was too far to drive back and forth to town to play hockey and soccer and everything else. So kind of just went straight for snowmobiles and dirt bikes and four-wheelers and go-karts and everything in between just to keep us busy when we weren't at school and that sort of deal. And just pretty much a pretty big outdoorsy family. Spent a lot of time ice fishing and fishing in the summer and hunting and everything you can think of in Northern Ontario.
Yes. Well, I was just going to say, in Sault Ste. Marie, you're a little bit outnumbered if you actually don't walk around town with a Yamaha Skidoo jacket. So this is very fitting. Yes.
Exactly. So I was racing go-karts in just outside of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan in Kinross. And it was like, when I was 6 years old until I was 8. And there was turned to a point when I was 8 years old where I was sitting in class, and kind of within a couple of months, I slowly started working my way closer and closer to the chalkboard, and couldn't really see what was going on. My face was getting closer to the paper, and my teacher kind of brought it to my parents' attention. And was just like, "Hey, Mac, he's struggling to see. He might need some glasses or something, just to go get an eye doctor's appointment booked and see what's going on." So, kind of from there, went to the eye doctor, and my vision had kind of decreased drastically over this couple months. I think it's only been, 4 or 5 months since I'd been at the eye doctor.
Wow. And you had a clear check just before that?
Had a clear check. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was 2020 and was doing good. And then, it just went like right away. I was, showing results that just didn't really make sense. So we thought we'd give it a couple weeks and come back as, it's something so not really expected. The eye doctor thought maybe, I had some peers or something that had just gotten glasses or maybe wanted some glasses. And so I came back a couple weeks later and it had gotten a little bit worse. And they sent me down to Sick Kids in Toronto to get kind of a proper diagnosis and figure out what was going on. And that's how we kind of stumbled upon that I had Stargardt's disease, and that has taken all of my central vision, left me with 6% of the peripherals as of right now. It kind of does a little bit of waves. It plateaus and goes down a little bit. It plateaus and goes down a little bit. So I've been super fortunate to be stable around where I am now for the last little while. And it kind of led me from racing go-karts and playing around on dirt bikes to this new world of skiing that I am in now. My mom started looking for sports for visually impaired athletes right away. And, something that we could do as a whole family is
go mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
She was killing it. And
amazing.
Yeah. And so she looked into sports and kind of eventually she had stumbled across, I think it was Nordic skiing right away. And she was like, hey, like this is something that, she's also trying to protect me a little bit, as her blind kid's losing his vision. And she's like, I don't want him doing anything too crazy, but at the same time wasn't ready to put me in a bubble by any means. And someone at Alpine Canada actually reached out to my mom. They had gotten a hold of an article that I was losing my vision, and had just asked if we'd ever considered alpine skiing. And we skied on like Tuesdays at Buttermilk Ski Hill.
Yep, Buttermilk.
It was cheap night, and it was only 15 minutes from home, so it was nice to go. We'd go night skiing there every week, just as a family, just hanging out. And we looked at a couple of videos that Alpine Canada had sent over, and it looked like a lot of fun. It was a lot of videos of one of my old teammates, Chris Williamson. So we were like, you know what? That's probably about as close as we're going to get to racing go-karts. And it looks fun and fast and interesting. Might as well give it a go.
It's amazing. I just love that you're living life still, right? And your mom and you're looking ways to still continue to live life to the fullest right from the get-go. And I just love this. But can you take us back for a second when all of this is happening and you're down at Children's Hospital in Toronto and, all of this is unfolding and, you must have had your own fears going through this, seeing less and less of your world every day. Take us back to what you were feeling inside that you can remember as a child.
You know what? It's hard to remember. I think my family handled it so well that it really didn't seem like such a drastic change. And it kind of, my vision deteriorated slow enough, like even though it was pretty quick, it deteriorated slow enough that I wasn't really noticing a big change, day to day. So it wasn't a huge scare for me. There's, you're 8 years old, the doctors are saying you're going blind, and you're like, no, I'm not. I can still see.
Right.
And you don't really think about it. And I think my family was so good about, like I said, not putting me in a bubble and still allowing me to do everything that I was doing beforehand. And it just kind of led to a really easy transition. Really, nothing really changed. So
so remarkable.
Nothing was changing. Yeah,
it's so remarkable because
changed.
As adults, right? Like just even on our last show and through all the shows we always talk about changing our focus point, right? From down the line and where we're at and, the end worst case scenario, right? To bring it back to the power of now and what we can do right here, right now and live life to the fullest, right? But as a child, it was almost, and with your amazing family, it was almost just innate within us as children to do those very steps, right? You're like, no, I can see well enough right now. What am I going to do? Like, let's move on. It's really admirable.
Matt, was there anything with friends or, it sounds like it was a very seamless transition as you were going through this physical change, but what was it like with friends? Did it impact you in those relationships?
You know what? It's, I think I had a pretty close knit group of friends growing up, and, nothing changed with them either. I think some of the kids were maybe a little envious of like my desk setup in elementary school. I had a big old desk with a bunch of visual aid equipment in it. But I think CNIB came in right as my vision was going down, and kind of just educated my school about my vision loss and why I had this equipment. And I think everyone just it became normal really quick, and there was never really like any issues, or nobody kind of reacted differently. It was pretty sweet. And I still had the friends that I grew up ski racing. At this point now I'm joining the ski team, and I've made friends that are now lifelong friends. I start ski racing with kids and spending every weekend together every winter long. And just as I kind of transitioned through high school, I still have the same group of friends that we snowmobile together every weekend, we fish a lot, and just have a good time. We actually, my friends still from high school, and just after we just finished a 2-week backcountry snowmobile trip in Revelstoke. So
love
great.
that. So this community of support, so important, right? And to help us in thriving no matter what we're going through. We've got a question coming in from James Finney. With the absence of sight, which one of your senses do you rely on most when you are skiing?
I think I obviously I use my hearing a lot, as I use a radio to communicate with my guide Tristan, and he basically explains my surroundings a little bit with more detail than I would be able to see them as. He's not as much saying left and right as I can still see enough for that. It's more so just talking about different terrain changes and snow conditions. So between listening to what he's saying and just having a really good sense of what's happening under my feet, I think that's the way that I kind of adapt to not being able to see what's happening for the most part.
So let's take this back a bit. So you decide you're going to get into skiing, and how is this made possible to keep you safe on this ski hill? So tell us when it first started. I know your brother was a big part of this, so please tell me about your brother and how this all evolved.
Yeah, he. So basically, I joined the ski team at Searchmont this year. I don't even know what year it was. I was 9 years old, and it would probably be 2008, 2007. Yeah, good at math. We'll figure it out. And I raced able-bodied for the first 4 years and just raced without a guide. And as my vision was slowly deteriorating, I could still see enough to make my way around a course. And I just kind of raced around Northern Ontario, and I guess as every other nod kid did. And it got to the point where my vision was deteriorating enough when I was in 2011, I'd say. Okay. And beginning of 2011, I kind of made the switch, and my brother and I decided that we were going to start skiing together as a pair. And he had also just started ski racing the same year that I did. And I'd slowly been racing around Northern Ontario as well. So we ordered a set of radios online, and, with the help of a local ski team at home, we kind of continued to train as if we were training for able-bodied. Just we skied the courses together, and we tried to figure out how we were going to make that work. It's a big transition going from skiing on your own to skiing 30, 40 feet behind somebody, and you just have to there's a lot of trial and error. We messed a lot of things up, and it was a constant learning process throughout that whole season. And then at the end of the season, we decided to pack our bags and head out to Camberley, BC for our first nationals. And we just wanted to see kind of where we stacked up in the para world. We hadn't been around it at all. And as a visually impaired skier, I hadn't really skied with another visually impaired skier ever before, and didn't really know, are we doing well? Do we have a lot of work to do? Where are we sitting? And right from there, we ended up going out and having some more success than we thought. I think we had a couple medals during our first nationals, and the Canadian Paralympic team kind of swooped right in and kind of adopted us into their development program right away, and it kind of just snowballed from there. Like 2, maybe 3 weeks later, we were at a training camp in Nikiska, and it kind of went to the next season where we raced on the NORAM circuit and just kind of bounced around North America and raced with a bunch of other up and coming athletes, and just allowed us to, get a lot more race experience and kind of really dive into the Paralpine world. And my jaw is just dropped, right? Because of all that you've accomplished, and, just this trust that obviously it's easier to have this trust with your brother, right? Because you're so connected with him, and you've got this, obviously all of your trust for your safety is in with your brother at this time. And then I know your brother ended up struggling with some back injuries, and you've had to switch that guide, right? And I'm really curious as to how you have been able to hand over that amount of trust, right? Again, in working with someone else now, because gosh, I think that alone would be such a big step of courage and bravery, right? So please tell me about that. BJ had struggled with some back injuries and concussions, and just wear and tear on the body that ski racing brings. And after 2016, he decided it was time to kind of hang up the boots and give his body a little bit of a break. He had some herniated discs and stuff like that. It just really doesn't get better over time. And he moved on. And throughout kind of his career, I had skied with with a couple guides, just because he would be injured for a little bit at a time. So I had the opportunity and skied often with Rob and Timmy. And he would step in when BJ got hurt, and we would that's how I kind of started getting used to skiing with a different guide. And, I skied with my coach Lasse sometimes, just like whatever we had to do to make it work.
And was this first time that you had to ski with another guide? Was it hard? Or was it just, I'm just going to go do this?
I think it was definitely different. It was kind of a fun challenge. I think you can learn a lot from skiing behind a different guide. Mm-hmm. And, everyone skis a little bit differently, and there's a lot you can take from that. So me being able to ski with Rob, who was a really phenomenal skier, allowed me to progress in skiing as well, and just, make little tweaks to my skiing that I could move forward, bring it to when me and BJ were skiing together again. And I think, you don't like a lot of people think, like, how do you get that trust? And honestly, you don't really have an option. As soon as you kind of drop in with a different guide, it's either you listen to them or you don't really know what's happening. So you kind of just put all your eggs in one basket and hold on and hope for the best. And I've been fortunate enough that it's worked out over the past couple of guides. I skied with BJ until 2016, on and off with Rob, and then in the end of 2016, I started skiing with Jack Leach, who guided me through the 2018 games in Pyeongchang. And so I skied with Jack for a couple of years, and I like I said, I've just been so lucky and fortunate to have great guys that have stepped in to guide, and not only great people, just really great skiers, and it's been a lot of fun. And then after 2018, Jack retired, and he went to school, and Tristan Rogers has jumped in kind of since, and me and T have been skiing together now. This is our third season, and we're skiing well and just having a blast together and working our way into Beijing next year.
Oh, this is amazing. And you kind of like you excuse me, you have it set up that you talk as you're down the hill. You can hear him, what he's saying. Yeah. Okay. All the time. That's amazing. And he gives you tips and guides as to what the terrain is or when the turns are.
Yeah, exactly. We have radios that are normally used for like motorcycles, kind of communicate back and forth. And we pretty much every day we go through a course beforehand, have an inspection. We come up with key spots in the course that we need to focus on. And kind of by the end, we build up just a mental image of the whole course, go through a full visualization and know exactly where we got to do and what needs to be done, where he needs to communicate, certain aspects of the terrain or different combinations in the course and stuff like that. So we have a pretty solid game plan before a race run. And then, once we go through, we'll visualize for, pretty much every chairlift ride until it's go time. And then, it's something you kind of practice and work with. And by the time you're ready to race, you already know what's coming up around the corner. You just, he's, just reiterating what's ahead for me, just so I can be in the best position possible.
Mac, I like that you brought up the visualization. That was a question I was going to ask you. I always hear so many Olympic skiers, they visualize, and so, you brought that up. How has that impacted you when you're visualizing, in preparation to go down on a race? How does that impact you? If you could share a little bit about that. Do you feel the visualization has a positive impact on you? How did your body feel in that moment? Love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so visualization is a skill that, a lot of athletes, it's something you really need to practice as a ski racer. Some of our tracks are 2-3 kilometers long, and they're, you lose lots of elevation. You're going pretty fast. So you need to know where every bump, roll, every, a lot of blind rolls. So you need to know where you need to be set up line wise coming into the next roll. And so you can be on track when you come over and you don't put yourself through a panel or end up way off line. And, so it's something, you start practicing right as a young athlete, and it's something that I preach that you need to really focus on your visualizing and know exactly where you want to be when you get to this spot. And for me, I think with being visually impaired, I just kind of fill in the blanks. Just with what I need to, I just pay attention a lot more to every bump and every ripple. And, if I can't see 3 gates ahead, I still know exactly where I need to be at each panel. And, that way it just kind of puts me in the right spot at the right time, hopefully. You know, I've definitely made a few mistakes over the years, but it's they're all lessons learned, so it's pretty sweet.
I just love this. Like, even watching you speak, like, you are just so happy-go-lucky. You are so jolly. You are just so filled with smiles, and your joy just radiates from you. You are truly so genuinely happy, and it's such a joy to be with you. And I always propel this message, right, to my community and to my coaching clients, that we truly can find happiness and joy in today, no matter what we are navigating, right? We can truly bring back that power to find it right here and today. And you are just the shining example of that very message. And I am just so happy to be sitting here having this conversation with you. I just had to interrupt and say that because I'm just so dumbfounded by all of this. And I'm so inspired. You amaze me.
And I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Like, for all of our listeners, like, I don't know if you guys are skiers. So I grew up skiing and I love skiing, and I've lost the vision just in my right eye. I still can see out of my left eye. And when I go down the hill, gosh, my depth perception has changed. Everything has changed, right? And my left vision isn't necessarily the best. So when I'm skiing on a sunny day, it's super great. I can see I've got great light and I can ski. But as soon as that light dips away and you're even lower part of the hill and I dip down into a lower light area, oh my goodness, my skiing changes immediately. And I'm like instantly like this little old granny, like going down the hill with like every protective measure mode around me, right? And my kids are like, I always put them ahead of me to kind of follow. And I can't even really tell if I'm about to ski into a snowbank or if I'm going to ski into a mogul or what the terrain is like at all. And I am just so, you're down there racing. I can't even imagine the speeds. I am just so in awe of what you have conquered. I cannot wait to come to Whistler one day and ski with you. It's just an hour and a half away. I'm coming soon, one day soon, my friend. But
yeah, please let me know.
I am so inspired by you, and I'm sure our listeners are just amazed. So tell us about hard days. What are some hard days that you experience?
Yeah, actually, you just kind of touched on kind of one of my biggest struggles is light. You know, sometimes we're dealing with a lot of really dark terrain. We train early mornings. So when, you know, you're on snow and middle of winter, 7:30, 8 o'clock isn't very bright outside. So I deal a lot with, you know, just waiting around and hoping that some sort of light will come in and then I'll be able to have a productive training day. And along with that, like, sunny days are great, like you said, light's good, and I can see a little bit more of the terrain. And as soon as you kind of wake your way through a course, you're going to end up to spots where there's lots of shadows, and those are a big struggle for me as well. But, you know, I think like the biggest downfalls in ski racing are obviously going to be injuries, and I've been fortunate, but I've definitely been through my fair share. You know, my brother had a bad back, and over the past 3-4 seasons, I've been struggling with the same kind of thing. You know, herniated discs, and other than that, I've been pretty good. You know, I have one little tear in a meniscus I got fixed up, and other than that, it's been good. I think just, you know, injury and wear and tear on the body can be pretty hard at times, and the biggest things are just being able to kind of learn from the mistakes that cause them, usually a crash, and be able to kind of put the good in with the bad. And, you know, if you did crash, you obviously did something wrong. You can analyze and figure out what you did and how you can fix it, and kind of use it to move on another day. The coaches always say, you know, some days are going to be work days. It's not always, you know, sunshine and rainbows on a ski hill. It's lots of days are just, you know, a grind, and you're putting in work and things.
Especially here on the West Coast.
Exactly. You know, you're dealing with weather. You're just trying to put in, you know, everything could be great. You could have an awesome course, and you just, for some reason, today's not clicking, and you're not getting out of the day that you want. So just being really good at being able to take, you know, the good out of each day and be able to kind of toss away the bad, and, you know, learn lessons from it, but get it out of your brain so that you can come in the next day positive and motivated, because it's easy to get stuck in a slump. You know, over the years, I've definitely found myself stuck in a couple of ruts, and it's always a lot more fun when you can just, you know, toss that out and go back to just the basics and just enjoying yourself and having fun on skis. And I think it all comes down to that, just being able to have a blast, you know?
Oh, that's amazing.
And Mac, what was it, you know, moving forward, you know, from all those moments that you learned from, Tell us about what it was like going to the, Winter Paralympics and that experience of, all those trials and trainings and winning. What was that experience like for you? And what were you feeling, especially at the moments that, there was recognition of the excellence of your sport and what you accomplished?
The Paralympics has always been put up on such a big pedestal in para sport. We don't have coverage like you're able-bodied do on every World Cup and throughout our World Championships and that sort of deal. So when we get a chance to, compete on the world stage and have the rest of the world be able to watch, it's a really big deal. And it's something that was a goal of mine, right from when I started skiing when I was 8 years old. One day I wanted to get to the Paralympics, and I think it really hit hard when I rolled into Sochi for the first time. It was a big deal, and I was freaking out. I'm not gonna lie, but at the same time, I was just like overwhelmed with pride and just so stoked to be able to represent my country, do what I love to do, and being able to compete was amazing, and then being able to stand on top of the podium was a whole nother level of just this overwhelming sense of pride, just being able to stand there and know that all the work and all the bad days and good days and the last, however many years and tough days in the gym, everything all kind of paid off for that one moment. And it's something it's truly unexplainable. It's incredible.
Yeah.
You're not just like my hometown hero. Like, you're not just like our country hero. You're like a world hero, my friend. I'm just so amazed by you.
Yeah. And I think, Matt, like for you standing on the podium when you won, I mean, that's, first of all, it's a tribute for you and your work, but it's also an inspiration for so many other young people that feel I can't, or there's barriers. I mean, that is just profound. It really, really is profound. Did that go through your mind at all when you were there, of thinking how it could inspire others who might be struggling?
Honestly, when I was younger, it wasn't as much of a thought in my brain. I thought I was just, trucking along, doing my thing. And I think after the games, when it really set in, my parents had reached out to the McKeever brothers right when I started to lose my vision. And I think after the games, I had a lot of messages, a lot of emails from parents and other people just going through the same thing I was. And I think that's when it set in, and I realized that, a lot more people were paying attention to what I was doing than I had realized. And then over the last 6 years or so, 7 years since Sochi, it's slowly progressed. And, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of younger athletes and share my story, and just hopefully, there's one kid that's really listening and just take something from what I've experienced and what I had to say. And it's a pretty cool feeling when that does happen. You get a message from a kid that you'd talked to a while back, and just little things, sending that, like talking about their first ski races and stuff like that, it's pretty cool. And it's pretty humbling to you've had that kind of effect on somebody.
You're empowering the way for so many people. Yeah, this is really, really great. I know my own 10-year-old, both my boys are watching this now, so I know you're inspiring them even right now as we speak. But my 10-year-old kind of summarizes, the whole impact of light and this fear of vision of the environment, as we were talking about, right? And I remember we went for an après ski at Dusty's in Creekside. I had promised him this little adventure after one of our ski dates one day, and we walk in. My oldest was in Quebec at the time, so it was just the two of us, and it was a packed day in Dusty's, as it usually is. And we walked in, and there was this kind of couple from across. They had a bigger table, and they invited us to sit on the other side. This was like long before COVID. And this really nice woman kind of looked at my son and said, "Oh, you look like you're a pretty great ski racer or skier. Are you a good skier, or is mommy a better skier than you?" And he thought about it for a second, and he said, "Well, on a sunny day, mommy is a way better skier, but on a cloudy day, I'm a way better skier." And she was like, "Well, that doesn't make sense." And I'm like, it does. But that fear that you're overcoming each and every day, I just admire it all. So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you.
Can you leave our listeners with one inspirational message that could move them to rise to their adversities today, no matter what they're fighting, no matter what they're navigating? Can you just leave our listeners with one last bit of inspiration?
Yeah. If I could say anything to, anybody listening, it's just to go out and have fun and enjoy whatever it is that you love to do. It could be just going outside, going for a walk, going for a bike ride. If you want to ski race, if you want to compete in any sport, just go out and do it and have fun with it. It's easy to get caught up in the pressures of life. And I think if you can get back to the basics of just, getting back to the little kid feeling of just going out and coming back all giddy after a day of something fun, it's a pretty big game changer in the way that you kind of take on the rest of your life. If you can have fun every day, even for 10 minutes, it'll change kind of your whole outlook in a really quick turnaround.
So great. Do more of what makes you happy, everyone. I love this. Thank you. Mac, how would our listeners get in touch with you if they had any questions for you?
You can find me on all my social media. Facebook is just Mac Marcoux, and so is my Instagram, just Mac Marcoux with no space. And you can also reach me on my email at mac.marcoux@gmail.com. And I do my best to try and respond to everybody as soon as I can. And feel free to reach out with any questions, no matter what.
Incredible. I think on an ending note too, I also want to comment on the strength of your family and that support and that amazing strength that it's been for this whole progression. I'm really just amazed by your parents and your brother. I think the support system is so important. So kudos, family. Woohoo. Right? The caregivers and the support, they don't often get a lot of attention. We should bring them on the show next time and find out how they navigated it all too, right? Because they also had a very different journey throughout.
Yeah,
and that's also an equally as important journey to discuss and really, really of value. So thank you. Amazing family.
Yes. And Max, seriously, thank you for your witness. And one of the things that's so great about you, you're just so calm. You know what I mean? You're so relaxed. And I think obviously that's from all your training and all that you're doing, but you just have a very approachable way about you. And I can just see, how that translates into, being such a great Olympian that you are, because, if there's anxiousness, we can't get anywhere, but you're having fun. You can tell you're having fun at it. And that's just the most brilliant advice. It really is right on spot. So thank you for that.
Risers, we hope you have loved this show. Mac is actually the third Searchmont ski runner that we have had on this show. So Searchmont produces these great little warriors, and we've also featured Jill Wheatley. We've featured Stephanie Keena, and now we've featured Mac, and what an amazing group of humans these all are. So thank you for being with us today. And we hope you found inspiration. I'm so awe-inspired by Mac and by all that he brings to us. He is an exemplary person to have on the show for all that we emulate. We are so happy to have had you with us today. Thank you. Have the best day. All the best.
Hey, thank you so much.
Bye. Doing this. Right? I think this is so good. All right. We're starting up.
It's a great day. It's a good day.
Oh, yeah.
Get out.
Woo! Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, risers. Welcome, thrivers. It is going to be a good day. It is an excellent day. We are so happy that you are back with us today. We are here live. We're a little bit green with the live, so thank you for your patience with us. We're really enjoying the live environment, though, so please send us some love and ask us questions along the way. We are here to serve in any way that we can. We hope that you truly found inspiration in our last few shows that we put out. The last two shows were all for parents and to best serve parents and inspire and empower those parents on their paths with their children. So we hope you found a lot of inspiration there. Today, we have our guest host, Brian Bachand, with us back again. He was such a hit last time. He's back for a few more recordings, and we're so lucky to have him here with us today. Brian is from Evolution. If you are not familiar with his work, do check out his work. He is a phenomenal human being, and I just could not be any more luckier to have him on the stage with me today. So thank you for being here, Brian.
It's a joy. Thank you, Erica, for the invite.
Thank you. And we are so happy to have this conversation with Brad Reed, who has spent years struggling with mental health and chronic pain. Brian, will you please help me introduce Brad and welcome him to our stage?
Absolutely. It's a real joy to welcome today Brad Reed here to Rise Today. He is rising very early, coming to us live from Vietnam right now, where it's 4:00 in the morning. And Brad has an incredible journey and story to share with us today. After years suffering from mental health issues and severe chronic pain, Brad healed himself and changed his life, and he moved to Asia, courageously moving to a whole new place and trusting in the process. And it took him on a journey of self-discovery, growth, humility, and insight to finally reach a point where he was fully healed and able to help others. He is the proud founder and coach of a company called Repurpose You, coaching and training business leaders to really be aligned to who they are. Brad's goal is simply this: to help empower those he coaches to become the best version of themselves. Please join me in welcoming Brad Reed today, live from Vietnam.
Woohoo! Welcome, Brad.
What did I already did this privately, but Robin Williams said, "Good morning, Vietnam," huh?
Love that. Yeah, we're so happy to have you here with us, Brad. So take us back to help us, our listeners, like just shape things from the get-go. Take us back even before the mental health struggles. Tell us a bit about your life starting from scratch.
Sure. I mean, pretty average upbringing. I came from, a middle-class household in London, Ontario, Canada, which is 2 hours south of Toronto. People know Toronto, so I'll reference that. As where Brian lives now. And, things were relatively standard. There wasn't really any, major highs or lows, just like you would say, like a normal upbringing, relatively speaking. Yeah. And, I got into high school and mental health issues started at 14. So do you want me to go back a little further and keep going, or we can start there?
Well, I'm curious, like, what do you feel was the trigger? If you kind of grew up with this, quote unquote, normal childhood, and you served as a very happy child, what do you think was that trigger at age 14 that kind of started this path for you?
Well, I remember it was really severe anxiety, and I would get these, these thoughts of horrific things happening in my life. And I don't know where that came from or where it emanated from. And it turns out it was a form of OCD, and you call it morbid OCD when, you're sort of obsessed with negative events occurring, and really extreme ones too. And I remember at the time, around 14, mental health was still weird. You know what I mean? It was still one of those things that there were support systems there, but it was like, what do I do? Who do I really talk to? How do I explain this? And I went in to see my school guidance counselor, and it was like, one of the most profound days ever, because I was so scared, so lost, and I felt so isolated.
And so you even went for help.
Yeah, sure.
Take that big step, right?
Sure.
Despite the stigma that you're talking about mental health. So you take that first step, and then you see this guidance counselor, and I'm guessing it wasn't the most positive experience.
The guidance counselor is fine, but she at the time, I don't think they had the training to deal with it. So they had an in-school psychologist who I went to go see, no problem. And even he was a little bit befuddled. He's like, well, he gave me some techniques that were a little bit strange to try, and I didn't. But then he referred me to a community psychologist who was wonderful. He was wonderful. So finally, I got the help. But I remember the amount of relief that I had when I first went to see that guidance counselor. It was like the weight of the world had lifted, because for the first time at that point, it would have been months of really suffering, alone and isolated and feeling helpless in a sense. At the very least, at this time, I was being listened to. And I'm sure some of our listeners can relate to that, which is like, finally, I have a voice. And I remember just that step alone was wonderfully empowering, because it was like, oh my God, at least I can release it and somebody's there. I don't know what's going to happen, but at least when I go to the guidance counselor, something was like, oh, okay, somebody knows. You know,
It's that
it was
importance of validation, right?
Mhm.
Like having our
Mhm.
circle not even try to fix something necessarily, even our own supports, not even going for a therapy session, but even
Sure.
in the circles that we currently have as our own friends or family, and just having that space to be vulnerable with someone else and having that simple step of validation, so important. I'm curious though, you talk about the stigma of mental health, right? And that you made that big step to go in and start being open about it. But what gave you that courage at 14 years old to be able to be open about it? What was it that really inspired that bravery and that courage in you at that time? Because I find that really admirable and remarkable.
Well, I'm not sure if I'd use, if I can recall the feeling. I'm 32 now, so it's been a little while. And I think at the time it was desperation, actually, Erica, to be honest with you. I felt the need. There was such a draw to do something. And at every major point in my life when things have gotten really serious, I've always found the willpower to do something. So I think it was really willpower coupled with desperation. It was really to the point where I can't take this anymore. It was quite bad. It was quite isolating. It was confusing. I wasn't enjoying my days. I wasn't enjoying my evenings. I was becoming a little more regressed socially, a little more regressed in terms of, my performance was getting worse. And so it was just, at the time, it was very, very, very overwhelming. And I had to do something. And I'm
Sounds
like,
it sounds like you also then made a choice for you.
Yeah, sure.
To fight for you. That's
Very
really
much.
great. Yeah.
Very much.
What was it like? I mean, did you speak to your family as well? I know you went to the counselor, but did you share what some of your struggles with your parents or your siblings at that time as well?
I did. Mom and dad, and I love my parents dearly. We have a great relationship. But again, they just grew up, they're baby boomers, and they grew up in an age where, their parents came back from the war, saw horrendous things, and never spoke about it. It just wasn't, they just didn't have the tools, or they weren't equipped to deal with it. And it's not their fault. They weren't callous or rude. They just didn't know necessarily how to respond. And so that was part of the isolation too. Again, not their fault, but mom didn't really get it. Again, it was at that point where, if you look back, 16, 17 years ago, it still wasn't, it was still, in a sense, the word taboo. Or it was on the margin still. So it wasn't top of people's mind. You didn't have Bell Let's Talk days and things like that. And so, yeah, they knew, but not to the extent of the severity. And once they found out to the extent and the severity, they were actually quite supportive, which was nice. But I had to compel that. I had to drive that whole process, right? Yeah.
Did you feel shame because of that stigma, because it wasn't talked about? Did you feel any shame for what you were going through?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was like, what's wrong with me? There's got to be something. That's made it worse. That compound effect is that sort of negative feedback that I was giving myself. Like, there's got to be something wrong with me. I don't know what, I'm going crazy. This is bizarre. I'd see a movie about it, and I would imagine myself being that crazy guy kind of thing. It was at times it wasn't so good. So yeah, for sure, lots of shame. That's a really good word for it, Erica. Shame.
Well, how did you keep putting one foot in front of the other? So let's say I always we're here to inspire listeners, right? Who may be feeling that same way, right? And so how can we help inspire? Sorry, my headset just fell out. How can we help inspire those listeners who may be walking in similar grounds? They might be 14 too, right? How can we inspire them to take those first steps to really reach out and to get that support?
Well, I think that the encouraging thing about today is there's so much support. And I think your support can look different than mine, which is beautiful. I had to do this, dramatic walk into the office at school and find a guidance counselor, and I was dreading it the whole time. But there's so many things online today, like Google. You have organizations as part of workplaces that do these outbound call services. Friends and family are much more aware of these things right now. Canadian Mental Health Association's done a great job. I believe their numbers readily available on Google. And in terms of the courage to take the steps, one little baby step can be so absolutely transformative because you don't know what's on the other side of help, right? That's the thing. That was the big shift. I didn't know what was on the other side of help. I just knew the pain and the
I
suffering.
love that idea, right? It really
Yeah.
does come down to those small, simple steps. Sometimes we create
Sure.
these goals and they're too
Mhm.
like overarching, right?
Sure.
And then we almost set ourselves up for defeat. So these really small, simple tasks are so, so, so important. So yeah, just really breaking that down to, we had another guest recently who had talked about her weight loss mission, right? But really breaking each section down to one choice at a time,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Really could be of use even here. So can you please describe a bit more? So you talk about this anxiety that you experienced and this idea of morbid anxiety. Were you concerned about something terrible happening to yourself or to those around you that you loved?
Both.
Both.
And it was actually, let me backtrack. It was mostly the people I cared about. That was the interesting. That's why part of that, there was so much shame involved in that. Because I'm like, why do I keep thinking these things? Why do I keep imagining these things? What is going on here? And so that's what made it so disturbing, because it wasn't so much about me in that, and at least at that time, that was what I was struggling with in those years. And so that's one of the things that made it was, quite frankly, some days dreadful.
And what were the
Really
triggers that would make this anxiety worse?
I think, the spiraling. One thought would start another, and then another, and then another. And so there was environmental triggers, I don't think, at the time. And I think it was just mood would have been one. If I woke up not feeling so good, we tend to spiral.
Okay.
If we the thought, emotion, body feedback loop, it's like, okay, one bad thought and you don't feel good, and your thoughts and emotions, they're connected, and all these sorts of things. So any specific triggers, I'm not sure, but possibly at the time, my actual social network wasn't the best. My first year or so of school, I was quite isolated to begin with. And so I didn't have a solid social sphere, not a lot of friends to hang out with, not a lot of socializing or support. And that could have been a possible trigger as well. But I believe, because, I used to spend Friday nights watching Star Trek for 4 hours. I remember on Channel 32, and I forget what it was called, the new TNN or something like that. And I would spend Friday nights watching Star Trek kind of thing. Before I ended up developing quite a big social circle later, but I think that may have had something to do with it, Erica.
Hey, Brad, what was it like? I mean, you're taking some positive steps and but still having triggers. How did that impact like your academic work? In high school at that time, there's so much pressure about, where are you going to university? What are next steps? How did that start to spiral and affect your life as well?
Well, I was very lucky, because when I started to go into therapy, that particular style of anxiety was completely healed. That was one of the most relieving things. I first went to the school psychologist, and then I went to an inpatient or outpatient psychiatrist at London Health Sciences Center. And then I found a community psychologist, and we worked through it. So we did cognitive behavioral therapy, and we worked through it. So at that point, that particular aspect of that very bizarre extreme form of anxiety was dealt with. Thankfully, I'm so thankful, so grateful for Dr. Ken Foley, who's now retired.
Okay, before we go on, what were some of the tools that Dr. Foley helped you with to overcome that anxiety?
Sure. So I'm going to call it cognitive frame shifting. I don't know the technical term for it, but he would take one of those scenarios.
Yeah.
Say it was mom or dad falling off a building. He'd take one of those extreme scenarios that I would imagine, and we would play with it. So he'd be like, okay, well, they're going to fall off a building, Brad. Cool. Well, why don't you picture a trampoline at the bottom of the building?
So you changed the way you saw it.
Yeah, so I call it cognitive.
Powerful.
I train this in workshops now. Cognitive reappraisal is what psychologists call, if you're going to reflect on a negative event, turn into positive events.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the technical term for what he did, but that's what I was doing in my brain. And I made these scenarios quite funny. So, there'd be a trampoline at the bottom, and mom and dad they'd bounce off the trampoline into the clouds, and they'd start flying, and be like, oh, well, that's not too bad. And so, I would trigger humor. And that would bring harmony. So I think I changed the triggers, and I changed the feedback loop, and that was one of the things that we went through, and it was great.
That's really insightful. I mean, I talk a lot with
Yeah.
my clients about reframing their stories and rewriting their stories, right, in a more empowering way, and how that story can actually serve them. But what a great idea with these visualizations, even that you're having to reframe and reshift that visualization. I think that's powerful.
Yeah. And you know what? I was such an extreme form too. And so this worked at the extremities. So easily this can work in the middle, or the, you know, if you're looking at the spectrum, I was here. And if you're here, these kinds of exercises can be encouraged, you know, for anybody, even if you're having a rough moment or a bad hour or a bad day, try them. They're just beautiful. Another thing that we did was we kept an eye on sort of my ridiculous self-doubt, which was great. And so he helped put things into not a short-term perspective, but sort of a long-term perspective. Like, will this really be an issue a month from now? That was helping with more normal anxiety, that I call it. And you know, we would reframe my thinking around issues, and we would look at things in a more long-term perspective, so I wouldn't get caught up in all those details. And so that was one of the useful tools too, from what I remember.
Really helpful. And were you able to actually identify where this all stemmed from in the first place?
I don't know. It was a horror movie. You know what? I didn't remember until just like literally 2 seconds ago, Erica. So yeah, it was a horror movie. That's what it was. And I remember leaving that horror movie and I was horrified.
So traumatized.
Then, yeah, that was the trigger. That was the trigger, actually, now that I remember. And it was no particular horror movie for any particular reason. I remember asking the psychiatrist about this. I'm like, did that have anything to do with it? He's like, no, it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, so that was.
Yeah, who knows, really? Just curious. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate that. It's
But you use a term that I like, you know, your ridiculous self-doubt. I like that. So how do you define ridiculous self-doubt? I mean, we all have self-doubt at times, but what makes it ridiculous self-doubt?
I think it was to the extremes, in the sense that, like, one day I won't be able to get out of the house. This illness is going to drive me crazy. I'll be isolated in my bedroom. I'm not going to have a future. So the normal issues, I remember one of the isolating things, these worries at the time were so horrific that I wished for normal kid problems, normal teenager problems. I'm like, I wish I could worry about finding a girlfriend, or I wish I could worry about school, or I wish I could worry about normal things, because I was so preoccupied and caught up in this loop of, you know, really extreme thinking that I just, everything was extreme. So when I say ridiculous self-doubt, it was like, you know, man, I can't even worry about graduating right now. I got to worry about making sure that I don't get locked up in the asylum. Like, there was just those aspects. The magnitude of my worry was just so much larger than what the average was. And I remember, I think that answers your question, Brian, was about ridiculous. Like, it really was. Some of them were ridiculous, but at the time they felt very real. That was the scary thing. It felt so real, right? Subjectively, very, very real. And so that was one of the beauties of seeking help, was dealing with that and eventually relieving myself, so to speak. Yeah.
We have a great question. I love this one. Dwight, can you leave this up for a bit? Because I want to get to this in a little bit. I really appreciate this question, and we will get to this very quickly. Before we do that, Brad, I want to hear, so you're going through high school, right? You're struggling with these anxieties. You kind of overcome most of the grandiosity of these morbid anxieties that you're experiencing. But then you talk later about, you know, really years of experiencing mental health consequences and even chronic pain syndrome. So can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Well, I think, you know, high school went okay. And then towards the end, you know, I really excelled. I became sort of a high school hero. I remember going back several years later, and, you know, I got into a lot of trouble in high school, not in a bad way. I was never mean or vindictive or things like that, but I was just bored and, you know, not focused. And towards the end, you know, after that extreme anxiety was sort of dealt with, I had standard anxiety, you would call it. You know, finally, at least normal things to worry about. Okay, I was a little anxious through high school, the rest of high school. I could deal with that. And I was a little moody. You know, that could be dealt with. And then did really well my final years of high school. And then I went off to university. And then when I went off to university, there was a few bouts in between where things got really bad again. really, really bad again. And when I say really bad, part of it was triggered by, I knew I wasn't studying the right things or moving in the right direction for my life. And that produced sort of wells of deep depression. I would spiral right out of control to the point where I'd be up till 5:30, 6 a.m., wasn't being productive, wasn't doing my schoolwork. And so it got to the point where my depression was so deep that I had to get on prescription antidepressants at around, I want to say 1920. I don't remember.
And did you find that helpful?
At the time, yeah. At the
Okay.
time, yes, indeed. I remember that the transformation for me at the time was night and day.
Wow.
Now, I since don't endorse antidepressants so much, and we can get into that later. But at the time, whether it was real or placebo, I don't know, but I felt better, for sure, without question. And it gave me a lot of my freedom back because I wasn't burdened. I was living on my own at the time, and I wasn't burdened with this like really deep level depression that was just crippling. Absolutely crippling. Like I couldn't even function. I didn't care about anything. It was like, I don't care about school. I don't care about this. And I remember one of the irritating things for me when I went to seek some help for this at a few times during my academic career in university was they always had a bias towards you must be anxious because of schoolwork. And they were trying to normalize it. And I remember because so many students probably rush in to see them and they want to skip their exams or do things like that. And okay, fine. But they were trying to frame it for me. And they're like, this is normal. You should feel like this. It's a stressful time of year. I'm like, no, like, I don't care about my exams. You don't understand. Like I could care less. There's major issues going on here and I need some help. And so,
yeah, I've experienced that myself too, where, I think certain ones in these professions, they just see these things so often, right? So they almost just automatically bulk us into these categories. And I know I also experienced this in a bit of a different way, but I remember waking up in the hospital one night and I completely could not breathe. I had recently been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia and I just could not breathe. And I woke up literally gasping for air. And my nurse came in and I just adore this nurse. I still adore her now. She came in and she was like, oh, you're just anxious. Everyone in here has anxiety and just, just calm and just take a few deep breaths. And, I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm anxious right now. I can't breathe, but I think I'm anxious now because I can't breathe. I don't think it's the anxiety causing the lack of breathing. And, but then she's like patting my back and I'm like, I think I'm going crazy here, like I'm just like doubting myself then. And I'm like trying really hard. And, sure enough, they find out a few hours later that my lungs had so much fluid in them. But I think the automatic go-to for so many, right, is just to go with this norm, but taking a more individualized approach to each and every human that walks through our doors is so, so, so important. So that's a really good point that you raised.
Agreed, very much.
Brad, what would you have liked someone to say to you at that time, rather than just saying, oh, it's, just because your exam or you're stressed out? What would you have liked to have heard from someone at that time?
This in sense is going to partly answer the listener's question, but just to listen.
Just to listen. That's great. Yeah.
Like really listen, you know what I mean? And be present and engaged and take what I say very seriously. Because that, to me, it's a night and day difference when someone's with you and engaged with you and present with you. You can tell.
And this is exactly what you said right from the get-go when you reached out and took out that first step for help with your guidance counselor, right? Just that you had that space to be vulnerable and most importantly, to be validated. So yes, in response to this question, again, I too would support that 100%, just create that safe space. And in my own coaching programs, I always advocate for the really important step to be real, right? And there's almost this like inherent societal pressure to be positive no matter what is happening on our journeys. But the first really important step is to be really real about those hardships and to allow ourselves the space to experience those negative emotions and process them and let them out in this safe space. And again, not necessarily having someone that we're talking with try to fix it. Right? Because that's also really important. Sometimes something can't be fixed right on that day, right? When I'm facing a terminal prognosis with leukemia, I don't necessarily want someone to say it's going to be okay, right? Because I don't even know what's going to happen at that point. I just want someone to say, shoot, I get how hard this is, right? Or just validate what I'm going through at that time. And I think that that would be the same in this scenario. Just so important to let that person be really real and have that safe space to do so and be fully vulnerable, because there's so much power in that vulnerability, and we can really allow ourselves that space to let down all of those walls around us and all those guards that we all hold. There is power in that, and that is where the power and the magic comes from to transform from that point. But and I'm so passionate about this because in my early days of having cancer, I was like, oh yeah, this is just totally a blip, right? Just a blip. Like, I'm going to be fine. I've got an 80% chance of responding to the first round of chemotherapy. Come watch me on my exercise bike. Like, what can I get you from my cocktail of choice, ice or no ice from the water fountain, and it was just a blip. And I didn't want to let any of that hurt in. I didn't want to recognize the grandiosity of cancer that was in front of me, right? Because this was just, I needed to be positive. I needed to have that positive outlook, but this was all just kind of surreal, right? I needed to let myself grieve the emotions of all that cancer had ripped away, or for you, all that mental health issues had ripped away at that time, right? We really need to encourage everyone in our space to be so real. Yes. Very important, Brad. Thank you.
Welcome. The one thing I would say too is I trained with peer support counseling. And one of the things that we always talked about when responding to someone in mental health crisis, specifically, I did this exact thing, which is responding to, we called it mental health first aid. So responding to people in crisis. And one of the things that we want to avoid is victimization or, compounding. So if they're sharing sort of a traumatic story or something that's deeply disturbing, we don't want to say that sounds horrible, because we feel like we're echoing their sentiment, but what we're doing is we can validate their negative response to things. Mm-hmm. So we want to be neutral in our language. It's like, okay,
excellent point.
Thank you for sharing, and I'm here to support you, and what can I do for you? So we want to be relatively nurturing and encouraging, but relatively neutral when it comes to responding to things that for them are deeply troubling. And then we want to guide the discussion in a direction, which is to support. What can I do to support you? How can I help? Is there anything you need to drive? Do you want to go? Whatever, things like that. So that would be one more thing I would add to that question.
Thank you to our listener for that question. So how did the chronic pain side of it come out? How did all these mental health, tell me the relation, because this too I'm very passionate about, right?
Sure,
the mind and the body connection. So please elaborate more on that.
Sure. So that's a deep one. That's a real interesting journey. So I decided, after really discovering holistic health and reading a lot about, depression and anxiety and how to heal yourself and optimize your brain. And again, things were still a little bit on the periphery. It was about 10 years ago now, 10 years ago. I realized, antidepressants long-term, this is not a good idea. This is just not a good idea. And at the time, actually, the side effects were not good. I at one point when I was taking the full 10 milligrams daily, it was, I was sleeping 12, 14 hours a day. And if I didn't sleep 12 or I slept 10, I would just sleep past alarms and not care. I'd miss appointments and not care. I'd miss my lectures and not care. There was a pretty high level of apathy, and it was fatigue and apathy. And so there's a few other side effects, if I can recall, but I was like, you know what, I got to cut this crap out. And so I weaned myself off of those over a period of, several months, which isn't easy for a lot of people, by the way.
Did you speak to a physician about weaning yourself off the medication, or was it your decision, or was it something you kind of worked together on?
It was my decision, and I spoke to them, and they were supportive. In that sense, because I wanted to go the holistic route. But again, the modern psychiatry, and it's very, there's such an emphasis on pharmaceuticals, and I think their information's so wrong, because I've always listened to the patients. So I've read forums and blogs and people who've had not good experiences with benzodiazepines or antidepressants, and they can be extremely dangerous medications. Extremely dangerous. And if you don't wean yourself off them properly, they can produce, short-term and long-term effects. And so I was very careful about that.
I think so important. I'm just going to add a little note in for our listeners too, because so important. We're here to share these personal stories, right? And I think these medications also do have a purpose in certain context, right? Yes. And so we're not here to advise globally on anyone's path and to take anyone off medications or to advocate. We're just here to really share tools as to how to best stay the course and move forward. And so these decisions are Brad's decisions, and if you feel similar decisions, chat with your physicians, right? But just wanted to point that out.
I was just going to qualify. I'm not a certified medical professional. This is just my opinion, okay?
But really great, and it's so important to share. So that's why we're here.
And they do serve their purpose without question. And some people, they're highly transformative, and the difference between medication and non-medication for them is life-saving. And so again, but like anything, there's definitely some challenges with there. And so I wean myself off slowly. Originally the doctor said, a couple of weeks. I'm like, no, man, that's a little foolish. So I took, 3 to 4 months, I think. And then things were okay. I mean, things were sort of back to normal. There was I wasn't feeling great, but I wasn't feeling good, but at least I was off the meds. And I remember my sleep patterns were starting to return to normal. I'm like, oh, I can sleep for 9 hours. Cool. Or 10 hours and 9. And then I remember about 8 months or 9 months after I discontinued the medication, I started developing one day at work, this sort of these cramps in my feet. And I didn't know where it came from. And, the cramps in my feet started. And then I'm like, okay, whatever. I've just been walking too much. And then the next day they got worse. And then the next day they got worse and worse until day 5, the pain from my hip or my stomach right down to my feet was so unbelievably overwhelming. I could barely walk. Wow. And it was like this. Yeah. It was like these electric bolts it was like somebody plugged in, an outlet into my lower spine and my legs. And I was incapacitating. I could literally barely walk. It was horrendous how much that pain was, and that's how it started.
And what was the cause of the pain? What were you told by medical doctors or whoever you sought help from?
Well, originally we thought it was mechanical. So you thought it was like a bulging disc. But I'll describe to you the symptoms because, somebody listening to this may resonate with it. But it was very, very intense electric bolts that ran, again, from my lower back right down to the bottom of my feet. And touching my feet to the ground would produce this rippling sensation right up to, again, my lower back, and just like electricity. It was just awful. Wow. So I would walk like my feet were kind of like this. I wouldn't want to put my feet flat because I would feel that pain and I would trigger those things in the bottom of my feet. And, originally we thought it might've been mechanical, but it wasn't. So I went to physiotherapy and all this stuff. And it turns out, I remember the diagnosis the one day when I went to see the physiatrist was he got in his recorder and he said polysensory peripheral neuropathy, ? Fibromyalgia, ? Chronic fatigue, ? So really those 3, right? And I think that was as formal as the diagnoses ever got. And that was quite a bit later. That was a year later when the pain had went body wide. So it was everywhere at this point. But that's where it started in my legs. Yeah, and it was unbelievable. Like people would see me, and I looked like someone who was, in a sense, it was very crippling. So
how old were you at this time, if you don't mind me asking?
23 or 24.
23. So at a time in your life that you're meant to be thriving and in your 20s, having so much fun, you're just literally incapacitated with all this pain. So what did you do, Brad?
Well, that was tough. It wasn't easy. There's nothing easy about that whatsoever. And, you can imagine going from relatively healthy and vibrant to just, okay, so now you're going to have troubles with work, severe troubles with work, because most of my work was standing. Now you're going to have troubles socializing. Now you're going to have troubles exercising. Now you're going to have troubles with your relationship. And now you're going to have trouble with your parents. Like, it was just awful. I remember like the thinking, the pain was one thing, and it was really, 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 really bad. But the other thing was when I would imagine my future and living like this the rest of my life, that thought was so overwhelming that I couldn't even go there. And that's when, my mindfulness
cascading.
training, it was awful. It's like, are you serious? I'm 23, 24. I'm going to live like this the rest of my life. And then you could become self-deprecating a little bit. Like, you're a bum, Brad. You're never going to recover. Like, these thoughts would spiral out of control. And so I needed to halt that. And I think one of the beautiful things was the mindfulness practice that I developed at that time, which really didn't
tell me about this.
Pain. Well, it was like, okay, I can deal with extreme pain and extreme anxiety about the future, or I can just deal with extreme pain. So, it was in a way, and I just finished my first, it's so strange because 5 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it was, before the pain really started, I'd finished my first introduction to mindfulness, which was the 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program done by John Kabat-Zinn, who's now doing a masterclass on it in the masterclass thing, which I saw. But I use those tools, every day. I had to. I didn't have a choice. It's like, okay, bro, you even day to day, I wouldn't even think about me imagining get to the end of the day. It's like, can I just get through the next minute? Can I just get through the next 30 seconds? Because the pain was so overwhelming. It was just unbelievable.
And so how did these tools of mindfulness that you talk about, what did you practice in terms of mindfulness that really served you in this time?
Well, it was listening to YouTube guided meditations, and it was just breathing and focusing. Yeah. It was just breathing and focusing. Yeah.
And how did that help you?
And did you learn different breathing techniques?
At the time, no. I know all these fancy ones now, which are really interesting. But at the time, it was just like, no, just focus on your breath. That's it. Just be here, be now. Be here, be now.
Yeah.
The cliche advice you would hear about mindfulness is what I was really practicing. And the reason being, Erica, is again, the thoughts of my future were so overwhelming and scary. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle the extreme pain and the extreme thoughts of the future. So again, I found the willpower to focus on what I could control, which was my thinking.
Yeah.
And God,
and what Brad is sharing now, is so pivotal in terms of any adversity that we are navigating, whether it's a cancer diagnosis and we're so focused on that end result, right? Whether it's career loss, whether it's divorce, whether it's mental health struggles, whatever we are facing, it is so incredibly helpful to change that focus point off the end destination and bring it right back in to, as Brad even said, right here, right now, the power of now. I love Eckhart Tolle's work, in this book called The Power of Now. It's powerful, right? But bringing it back to what we can control, as Brad said, in our environment, right in this moment, brings back the power to us, takes away the power from the adversity that we're navigating. It's a great way to become empowered on our journey. Love this.
Yeah. To me, it was survival too. It was like I remember there was a woman in Australia, I think, and she sort of went through the same thing. And I remember hearing that story, which says, I don't need to get through the whole night. I just need to get through the next moment. And some days it was like that. Literally, it was like, okay. And especially when the pain became body wide, because it sort of morphed and transformed. It started in my legs, which was bad enough as it was. And then I did everything I could, by the way, to try and alleviate the pain. I went to physiotherapists and I changed my diet. I was always a healthy eater. That wasn't really an issue, but I did juicing and I did Reiki and I did massage and I did acupuncture, and I was stubborn. I tried everything.
But it sounds like it didn't all click until it was also connected with this whole mind-body connection and your idea of mindfulness and what you're talking about. And that was the final kind of closing that circle of all of this healing of what you needed to do. That's beautiful.
Yeah. I think the thing was when I went to see my brother one day, who suffered from bilateral wrist tendonitis, and he'd been off work for a year. And I went to see him, and he was playing his video games. And I learned from Dr. John Sarno the connection between your unconscious mind and the pain that it produces. And that's since become very mainstream. There's a lot of physicians who work with that, the connection of mind body. But long story short is I went through a process of exploring my unconscious mind and how that connected to my pain and realizing they were the same thing.
Wow. And so to tell us today, you are thriving today. You
Yes.
have moved all the way over to Vietnam.
Yep.
Tell us about Brad today.
Brad today is fully healed, completely recovered, very, very aware of the mind-body connection and how that affects. And I'm back to kickboxing and at the gym, and I'm doing well, and all my chronic pain is gone. I suffered the chronic pain for 5 years. All of it's gone now. You know what I mean? I have little days where it spikes a bit, but now most of my role now is, I do executive coaching and corporate training with a heavy emphasis on personal empowerment and wellness. And that looks at mindfulness at work, that looks at confidence building, that looks at, improving performance through how we feel. And I'm so passionate about this stuff because it made such a night and day difference for my life. So everything I do is, conventional leadership training, but with a heavy emphasis on things like wellness and empowerment, habits, mindset, happiness, things like that. So it's so wonderful. And that's why Brian and I have had so many cool conversations about this stuff. So yeah, that's me today.
That's
trying
so
to give
excellent.
back, pay it forward in a way, and change the thinking over here around some of those things.
And Brad,
Tell us, Brad, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well,
Go ahead.
LinkedIn is a great way. Yeah, LinkedIn is a great way. So my LinkedIn's the best. My website's being built for Repurpose You. And so I don't have an email today or the website to get in contact with, but I think the best way would be check me out on LinkedIn, or you can use my other business email, which is brad@topprospectcareers.com. That's TOPPROSPECTCAREERS.com. 4:30 in the morning. So I'm working.
Wow. And Brad, what would be one small piece of advice for a listener right now who's listening, who's feeling so overwhelmed, whether it's they're struggling with mental health or they're having chronic pain? What would be one thing they could do as soon as they finish listening to the program today that could help them in this moment? What would be one small thing you would recommend that they do?
Be in the present moment and breathe. Get on YouTube, watch a mindfulness video, focus on your breath, ground yourself, and then rejoice in the fact that today there's so many amazing resources for things like chronic pain, for things like mind-body healing, for things like mental health. And then be a little bit proactive. And I encourage anyone to find that willpower to seek help. And there's so many resources, so many people you can talk to. And it's so empowering when you share your story. It's just sharing your story brings you the resources in some aspects, because people can form a resonance with that and go, oh, I'm going through it too. Find community, find support, be in the present, move forward. And I think you'll find your answers for sure.
That's exactly why we're here to doing this podcast. I love this all, Brad. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Very, very welcome.
Yeah, you're a beautiful soul. You're doing amazing work. And truly, when we come out of our own personal stories and share that authentically, it's so powerful. And so thank you for being so authentic and real and joyful as well about where you're at now, and an inspiration for others. So thank you.
And I love that word. I love that word, rejoice, that you use. So risers, thrivers, let's rejoice today. And let's be inspired by Brad. We hope you found inspiration today. And we have an excellent next show to bring you with Mac Marcoux, who's a Paralympian skier who does it all through the eyes of being blind. Be inspired. Yes, we can't wait to bring you that show. Thank you, everyone. All the best. Have a great day.
Thank you.